bath towels, televisions, fresh produce, clothing. On the surface, these items may not appear to have any relationship to each other. Sure, they exist in most households, even though they were probably bought independently of one another. Yet to the supply chain manager employed in the hospitality industry, they not only have a relationship, their very purchase can be considered critical to the achievement of corporate strategic goals and gaining competitive advantage in the marketplace. Just ask Paul Davis, Vice President of Strategic Sourcing for Starwood's North American operations. With hundreds of hotels and resorts in the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean, Mr. Davis's goal is to create the hospitality industry's best supply chain organization. The items procured within his organization include replenishable goods such as fresh produce and food items, but also extends to the sourcing of national contracts for non-perishable goods such as bath towels, electronics, staff apparel, energy, and contract services.
Our business philosophy really revolves around 5 things. We embrace Six Sigma methodology, which helps us with process improvement and efficiencies in what we do. We involve the hotels in the process, which I think is probably one of the most important things, where we have our customers actually helping us select suppliers and products and services. Third, we embrace technology. We use an e-procurement platform that helps our hotels become much more efficient and effective at ordering products and services, as well as providing us with critical information that helps us source to a greater level. Fourth, we rely on our suppliers. The partnerships that we have allow us to source much more broadly while keeping our overhead low by taking advantage of the resources that our suppliers bring. And fifth, we outsource where it's appropriate. We don't necessarily have subject matter expertise everywhere, and philosophically, we should only be sourcing things that we're best in class at. So we do look for other companies to assist us in certain categories.
It's easy to confuse supply chain processes with the routine procurement of goods and services. Starwood's supply chain certainly does include contracting, but it's much more. It consists of the customer relationship, order fulfillment, and supplier relationship processes. There are strong linkages among the company's upstream suppliers of services, materials, and information, and the customers of Starwood's hotels and resorts. If the upstream relationships are not carefully managed, downstream delivery of consistency, quality, and value to Starwood's guests may suffer. As a result, significant effort is placed on the nested processes within the supplier relationship process, such as design collaboration, sourcing, negotiation, contracting, and information exchange. Any number of events will trigger the involvement of Paul Davis's team in the design collaboration nested process of the supplier relationship process. For example, existing contracts expire, individual hotel brands seek new products, hotel property design teams generate ideas, suppliers bring new ideas to Starwood, new categories of products emerge and need evaluation, or a particular hotel needs help with a local service contract.
In the past, I would suggest that about 70% of our time was based working on commodity sourcing versus doing work for proprietary brand required products and services. That's changing. We're doing a lot more brand activity today. So we do a lot of work with our design team sourcing products and services that support lifting the brands to another level versus their competitive set. So I would say that about 60% of our time versus 40% in the past is spent on brand-related projects.
When a product or service needs to be sourced, the specifications are driven by internal customers such as restaurant chefs, housekeeping, and maintenance. Sometimes, sourcing an item simply means renewing an agreement with an existing supplier to add the item to the current product offering. Still, other situations demand the creation of a new category that hasn't been sourced before or may require using a third party to help locate sources. Due diligence is always performed by sending potential suppliers a request for information in either paper or electronic form. The responses returned by the supplier are entered into a database and help Starwood to pre-qualify them. With a suitable potential supplier candidate pool, Starwood then takes one of two paths. The first one is to conduct a reverse auction, where pre-selected vendors bid against each other. This is usually done with shorter-term contracts on commodity items that have low external customer visibility. Kitchen uniforms, hotel room door keys, and paint have been sourced this way.
One of the misnomers that's out there is that reverse auctions are for everything, and that's simply not the case. A reverse auction should only be used when you have a minimum of 3 suppliers that are bidding for business that is purely a commodity, meaning that the quality and the service would be exactly the same regardless of what supplier that you brought in. That's appropriate to use in a reverse auction where you only care about lowest cost of goods. With that said, even after the auction is over, there's a further step that requires additional negotiation, and we don't always select the lowest cost provider. It really depends on the quality and the service as it compares to the other 2 commodity companies or more companies.
The second option is to send out a request for proposal, which requires the vendor to put its best terms forward at the outset for consideration.
Electronic requests for proposals, requests for information, requests for quotes are used when you need more subjective information around quality and service as well as price. A good example of that is when we're working on brand-related projects where, while cost is important, really it's more front-facing to the customer, and therefore what's most important is the quality that the customer is receiving and or the service that's being provided.
After review by the supply chain team, the vendor winning the auction or emerging from the RFP review activity as the best fit is engaged in negotiations.
We believe that supplier relationships are extremely important because they're the ones that are out executing on your behalf. We build very strong relationships with our suppliers that we choose before the sourcing process is over so that we get to know who is it that we're dealing with. Trust and integrity from our perspective is number one thing that we look for in a supplier, that we know that we can trust them, that they're going to be honest, that they're going to take care of our hotels as we would want them to. When we have selected a supplier, we take it to another level and challenge them to be innovative as well as what we're trying to do from a sourcing perspective. We really challenge the suppliers to think outside of the box, to look for ways to drive down cost or improve service or quality to our hotels that is not quote-unquote traditional. An example is many times when we're negotiating for a cost reduction, the suppliers always believe that we want to take it out of their margins. That's not necessarily the case. What we want to look for is non-value added activity that they can take out of their side of the business and we can share in that benefit. So in the end, many times they can be even more profitable if we're still able to get a lower cost of goods.
Starwood maintains this cooperative orientation towards its supplier relationships, building a partnership to maximize value for each party so as contract negotiations conclude, each side is comfortable with the price, quality, and delivery requirements they've agreed upon. When contract negotiations are complete, the different brands are notified and the buying and information exchange processes begin. At this point, you might think the job of the supply chain team is done. Yet managing the existing supplier relationship after the contract ink has long dried is perhaps the most challenging task of all.
One thing that can happen is that our brands can change direction. Innovation is key, and innovation helps keep our brands fresh, new, and ahead of the competition. So many times there are requests from our brands to change a product or a service out in order to meet those expectations of our customer base, and we need to react to that. A second example is an alternate supplier may come in, and for the sake of example, a commodity category, and they bring a program that could be more beneficial to Starwood than the one that we have. And we need to look at that. At the same time, while maintaining the relationship with our existing supplier through trust and integrity. And one way that we allow ourselves to take a look at those things is having a 30-day cancel for convenience clause in most of our contracts that allows us to cancel out if need be. That actually happens very rarely based on the commitment that we make to our suppliers, but it does provide us that option. Other things that can happen are guests change and the guests' requirements change. And sometimes that's brand related, sometimes it's not. And we need to be looking to see what the market is doing in order to make changes to meet those guest expectations. And that may require a change in a contract or in a supplier.
The contract involving sourcing of bed linens and terry cloth items is a perfect example. Not long after the contract was finalized, an alternate supplier approached Starwood with an offer to supply comparable quality goods at a much lower cost. Put yourself in Paul Davis's place. What information would be relevant for handling this situation, and what would you do? Refuse to consider the alternate supplier's offer? Check out the offer to see if the supplier's claims are true? Take the information to the existing supplier?
Think about what linen and terry are. They touch your body. They're an extremely important part of the hotel experience for the guest. So first and foremost, it's about quality. It happens to be a category that Starwood spends over $30 million a year in. So we need to be very careful about who it is that we end up selecting. What we did was we approached our existing distributor partner and challenged them to find an alternate manufacturer that could provide the same quality product at a lower cost of goods and at a minimum match what this other manufacturer had offered to us. But we didn't just tell them that they had to do it. We worked with them and we looked for sources internationally. And we were able to find a company that could manufacture the same quality, service, and at a considerably lower cost that was a US-based company but had offshore manufacturing in the Middle East. The end result is that we're going to end up with a cost savings of approximately 25% over what our original program was, have a stable source of supply, and support two initiatives that we have. One is that we balance our global sourcing between both domestic suppliers and international, because this company did both, as well as support our diversity initiatives, as this ended up being a minority-owned business.